Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And one of the very specific types of roles that you got to think about as your business scales is the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. I've been one. I've hired one. I think I've fired one. It is a critical, crucial role as your business scales. And so as I started to think about this, I wanted to find an expert who knew more than anybody about this topic. And I was very fortunate to get Cameron Herold to join us. Now, let me tell you a bit about Cameron, because Forbes Magazine calls him the CEO Whisperer. He has built businesses. By age 35, he built two $100 million companies, including one that you know, 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He's written best-selling books, including, get this title, Meetings Suck, which they do. And he's gone on to help build so many businesses through his organization, COO Alliance, which is the world's leading network of chief operating officers, or number twos, if you will, numbers two in a company. And so with all that, Cameron is the expert at the COO and how it relates to the CEO and how it can help your business scale. So Cameron, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
I'm so pumped because this is so misunderstood, right? And so botched, I'm sure, in a lot of cases. And so we want to get the facts and have you help us keep us straight on this.
Go ahead.
No, after you.
No, it's interesting because the whole area of the COO is often misunderstood. And I find it funny that Harvard actually wrote an article, I'm going to say around 12 or 14 years ago, called The Misunderstood Role of the COO. And they identified 7 distinct types of chief operating officers. And that, for me, was a real eye-opener to realize that it is just a very different role from all the others in the company. You know, there's
and to be fair, it's not one size fits all, right? There are different categories of situations where the CEO and the COO have one type of interplay, and another situation it could be totally different.
Yeah, and I think for our listener, we have to call it the second in command right now as well. Because what we're talking about is the COO or the VP Ops or the GM or the Director of Operations. It's whoever is, if the CEO is sick for 6 months and in hospital, who's running the business? That's kind of what I determine as the second in command or the COO.
And maybe that is appointed, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's named and maybe it's not.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was actually, so this is years ago, but when I built 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I was the second in command there as the Chief Operating Officer. And at one point in one of our meetings, one of our VPs put his hand up and he said, can we just call him the COO for God's sakes? Everyone knows he is. And I went from a VP Ops role to a COO role, and it was more for optics so that people understood really what was happening in the company.
As always, titles belie the actual org chart in a company.
Yeah, it's funny. People say they don't matter. They really do matter. They matter in a few ways. I've often seen people give out titles that are too big for the person as well. So, just because the person is your second in command, don't give them the COO title right away. Yep. If your company is small, start with the GM title, then move to a Director of Operations title, then to a VP Ops title. Because as you do, you can give them more responsibility, more visibility, and also a little bit more pay. But if you start at the COO title,
you have nowhere to go.
Yeah, they've often got expectations that are out of alignment.
So let's set title aside just for the moment. What is the most common base case that you see for a CEO and a COO, or more specifically, the CEO who says, you know what, I need to hire or name a number two? Does that tend to happen at a certain amount of revenue, a certain amount of employees, or business complexity? How do you know when it's time to even think about this?
Yes, and yes to all of them.
Okay.
It happens. So what I first see is a CEO or an entrepreneur saying, I need a COO. Usually when the complexity of the business starts to overwhelm them, or the amount of details starts to overwhelm them, and they realize they need someone to just help with running the company. Often the entrepreneur is great at a lot of things, gets energized from a lot of things, but starts to get bogged down in the complexity. And it may be finance, it may be engineering, it may be IT, it could be marketing or sales. It's just the stuff they don't love. And they need to outsource the stuff they don't love to someone else. So it becomes a second in command. The biggest mistake I often see is an entrepreneur or a CEO, usually in a smaller company, like let's say a 10 to 50 person company, who hires the second in command before they hire their own executive assistant. And I've always said, if you don't have an executive assistant, you are one.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur and you're building a company and you don't have an executive assistant, hire one of those first. And that will save you 12 months of needing to hire a second in command, because you can offload your admin, your details, your booking of calendars, your all of the travel, all of your email. There's so much you can get off your plate, which allows you, it usually saves you 6 to 12 months of really truly needing the pure COO.
And save you a ton of money. Obviously, an
Yeah,
admin's a lot less expensive.
huge money.
So would you say that most leaders, most CEOs and founders hire a COO too late or too early?
Um, I think they often hire them a little bit too late, but give them too big of a title too early. I think that you can probably hire someone to get. So here's what I do. I use something that I learned from a guy named Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach called an activity inventory. I pretend that someone follows me around with a video camera for a month, and I write down everything I see myself doing during that month at work.
Yep.
And then I categorize all the things in 4 ways, either I for incompetent, C for competent, E for excellent, or U for unique ability. Early on, you want to get all the stuff off your plate that you're competent and incompetent at, get those off your plate. What the entrepreneurs tend to wait a little bit too long on is getting the real true second in command who can take a bunch of stuff that they're excellent at and get that off your plate, but it's the stuff that you don't get energy from.
Right.
So imagine if you're only doing 2 or 3 things that feed you, that gives you energy, that you love doing. The second in command is often doing all the other stuff that you could be really good at, but that doesn't give you energy. And I think they often wait too long for that component.
Jeff Bezos often talks about this concept that he sees his role as to make 2 or 3 decisions a day.
Yeah.
He's got a very specific time of day when he likes to do it. I guess at that point you're allowed to decide whatever you want and the structure of the meeting, but that's his job.
Well, and even if you go back to, so I have like a number of CEOs that I coach all over the world, and I coach their second in commands. What starts to get fun when they really figure out roles, it becomes a bit of a yin and yang approach where it's a true 2 in a box. It's a true partnership between the CEO and the COO, and you get to literally divide and conquer. So now if the entrepreneur is left with just maybe 3 core things that they're great at, that they love doing, that they get energy from, and the only business areas that report to them are the ones they're passionate about, they're going to spend time on that stuff. But if the things that they're responsible for do not feed them, do not give them energy, they're probably not going to spend much time on them. And that's where a lot of the problems and mistakes and
Yeah.
costs come from.
Yeah.
So it can become a very expensive mistake in not bringing on the right second in command.
To make it further complicated, how do you think about best practices when it comes to the CFO? So a lot of people say the CEO and CFO is the most important partnership, and you have that yin and yang or push and pull, whatever. But then what you're describing, which also makes sense, is the CEO and COO. How do you
Yeah.
reconcile that?
Yeah, I disagree that the CFO and COO are the most important, because really what you need is the CEO is vision, the COO is execution. The COO has to sign, almost like a homeowner. The homeowner building a new house, that's the vision. The contractor has to sign off on the vision so they can do the blueprints.
Right.
The homeowner signs off on the blueprints to say, okay, your plans are what my vision is. Then they pass those to a team who make it happen. Well, in the company world, that's the CEO and COO. Finance, IT, operations, engineering, marketing, sales, those are functional areas that support the vision and support the plan, but they're not the plan. They're just a part of the plan. And I think it's like, so you can't have finance driving strategy, because it's not their role. But they have to be involved in strategy. They have to be involved in the planning process, but they're involved in executing the plan that the COO and the CEO often craft together or sign off on together.
So you mentioned earlier that there is a time when it makes sense to do this, and you talked about the level of complexity. Have you because you're the expert at this with the Alliance, have you tended to see a size business at which is a good marker, revenue, people, something? How many
Yeah,
years old?
I usually see it when you're hiring your first round. So first off, I've always heard this saying that a person can only have 8 direct reports. And I believe that to be true, except if they're all doing the exact same job. So if you have like 8 customer service people, you could probably have 14 of them because they're all doing the same role every day.
Right.
But if you have 8 different types of roles reporting to you, that's usually too many or right on the edge.
Yep.
I think a CEO can only have 5, because they also have culture, legal, and the board. that they have to actually take
Which
care
are
of. So I
full-time
look at,
jobs to manage by themselves, right?
yeah, so I look at culture, legal, and the board as 3 direct reports plus 5. If you end up having more than those direct reports, it's time for a second in command.
If you
The
have
second
more
thing I
than
would
the
put in
5
there,
plus those 3, it's time.
yeah. And then the second thing I would think about is that if you don't have time to truly inspect what you expect, to truly dig into the areas, to truly, be strategic, just to truly work on your areas of unique ability, that's probably an opportunity for you to hire someone else who can leverage you. And then the third would be if you're working on areas that are below your effective hourly rate, you'd be better to outsource those. So if, let's say, as an
Right.
entrepreneur or CEO, you're making $500,000 a year, your effective hourly rate is $250 an hour.
Right.
So if you're earning $250 an hour, if you're doing tasks that you would only pay someone $60 an hour to do,
Yeah.
what the hell are you doing it
You
for?
shouldn't be
Like,
doing it. Right.
correct. So
Right.
that's when it starts making sense to get that second in command in place so that you can build a team.
So you bring the second in command in, let's say from the outside. Let's say it's not an internal promotion.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that and set expectations with the team so you don't completely demoralize everyone? Because let's be honest, they've joined, they report directly to the CEO, and
It
now they
depends.
don't, and they
Yeah.
feel like they've been demoted.
Well, it depends on the level of the company. So a company's like a human, where we go from being an infant to a toddler to a preteen to a teen to an adolescent to an adult to a senior. So a company is very similar. If you've got 20 very junior employees who were all hired by the entrepreneur, and you hire a second in command, they get it. They understand. They know they're not the right run for the role. They know they don't quite fit.
Yeah.
When you're at 100 employees and you've got a senior team and managers, maybe a leadership team, and you're hiring a COO to come in above them, that's when some hurt feelings can start to happen. So what I do is I have a lot of clarity on the scorecard and the job posting for the COO role, so that they can clearly see that they do not have the skills and they have not done what's on that scorecard.
And if they want to
So
throw their hat in the ring, they're more than welcome to.
right. But the reality is, if they throw their hat in the ring, when you measure their hat against the scorecard, they're going to realize they don't have the skills to do it. Like
Right.
when I came in to build 1-800-GOT-JUNK, that was my third franchise company that I had built. So I'd already done virtually everything I needed to do at 1-800-GOT-JUNK for the first 5 or 6 years.
Right.
When I left after 6.5 years, I took the company from 14 employees to 3,100, and from 2 million to 106 million in 6 years. No debt, gave up no equity. We ranked as the number 2 company in Canada to work for. I leave and I'm like, God, this company's so big, right? We're operating in 330 cities and 46 states and 4 countries, and it was big. They brought in the former president of Starbucks US to replace me.
Hmm.
And Lonnie walked in and went, what a cute little company.
It's all
Right?
perspective, right?
So the team wasn't upset that
Yeah.
they didn't get the job. They were
Yeah.
excited to work for someone like her.
So you need to scope the scorecard in such a way that it reduces the hurt feelings, because it's very clear, very transparent, and also communicate and over communicate to the team.
Correct. And then the next part that I do is I actually get the team to help interview the potential COOs. So
Interesting.
they're a part of the process. So then they're feeling like, okay, this is kind of cool. We get to select who we're doing. I saw that really as a kid when the babysitter would show up. I'm like, oh, she sucks. But like, if I got to pick the babysitter, I'm like, yeah, she'd be great. Cause like, it's the girl from the beach who's super fun to hang out with.
You're not implying that the team should have veto rights.
Correct. Not a veto rights, but part of the selection process. Again, they're going to have to get to like this person later. Why don't you get to find out if they like them early on? See what the cultural impact is like, see what and because they're interviewing, they also all of a sudden learn the skill sets of the person, and they get buy-in much sooner.
Isn't that opening up a can of worms if the CEO and the board interview the finalist, want to proceed with the finalist? You have some of the team interview her or him. They don't care for them for whatever reason.
So
And then
would
you
you
move
rather know
forward
that?
anyway.
Yeah. Would you rather know that in advance or after you've hired the person? I would much rather know in advance that, wow, 7 of my 7 people don't like this person that the board likes. Maybe we missed something. Versus, wow, 7 out of 7 people interviewed this person and 5 of them really like them. 2 are kind of on the cusp. Okay. At least we have that data set.
Interesting.
See,
I can,
I flip the org chart upside down.
yeah.
I put the CEO at the bottom, and the CEO is supporting the VPs who support the managers who support the customers.
Yep.
We can all see the vivid vision of where we're going. And then our job as leaders is to remove obstacles. So if our job is to remove obstacles and to help align people and give them support, it's not to tell them what to do. Our team is really smart. We just often don't give them the chance to get involved.
Totally agree. I guess I just get concerned about the concept of people interviewing their prospective manager when, right or wrong, they felt they should have gotten that role.
Well, that's how the scorecard removes them, because the scorecard shows them very quickly they don't fit, and they'll realize they're doing an interview now. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, shit, this guy's way more qualified." Like if anyone had interviewed Lonnie, they'd be like, "Wow, she is way more qualified than I am."
Right. How
Right?
do
That's
you, so let's say you make the decision to bring in an outsider. Have you come up with the best practice in terms of what functions should report to that person? Should it be sales and marketing, all revenue?
it's
Do you not
everything that
fold finance under it?
yeah, it's everything that the CEO or entrepreneur doesn't love.
Got it. So it's really a personal
It's a total yin
reflection.
and yang. It's an
Yeah.
absolute yin and yang. It's like
Yeah.
my brother and his wife have what they call the blue jobs and the pink jobs, but half of the pink jobs are actually blue jobs from the old days. Like she just happens to like doing some stuff around the house, and he happens to like doing some stuff around the house. So they divide and conquer. It's the same thing in a true partnership inside the business. If you can hire for someone who loves to do it and has the skills, and that allows you to only work on the stuff that you love to do, and you have the skills, everybody wins.
What about if the terrific candidate for the CEO role says, I'll only take the role if I have this scope, and not out of ego, but out of, you can't hold me accountable for the revenue number if you're not giving me marketing, but the CEO
Right.
wants to hang on to marketing because they're good at it. How do
Then
you make that decision?
well, then it probably isn't going to be a fit, because they're going to be fighting over it. So it's great to know that right up front. That, see, again, it's kind of like it's why you don't get married on the first date.
Oh, you're not supposed to do that?
Right? You get to know the person. So I think that's part of the process, is saying, okay, here's the vision of our company 3 years from now, that vivid
Yeah.
vision. Do you want
Yep.
to help build it? Here are all the roles you're going to be playing. Here are the roles I'm going to be playing. Here are the meeting rhythms we're going to have. Really getting to know them and trust them, and see if you, like, day one, you should be giving the COO your access to your bank accounts, your credit card information, your passwords. Like, if the trust isn't so strong on day one, you haven't done enough interviewing yet with the
Yeah.
person,
You haven't found the right person.
or you haven't done enough of the interviewing and reference checks, right, to really know.
What about if the board or investors prefer candidate A and CEO prefers candidate B? How does a CEO founder make that potentially a job costing decision if they make the wrong call?
Well, either way, you're making the wrong call. You're either making the wrong call to go with the board if you don't like them, or you're making the wrong call to go with yours if they don't like them. I think you really have to sit down and actually then balance it out and really get introspective. Maybe you go back to the drawing board to figure out what is it they like. Maybe you go back to the scorecard to see what's missing. I'm very leery of a board that's really pushing to get their outsiders in, often to the detriment of the entrepreneurial company, who the founder often knows best. And I'm not a big subscriber to the build or bust philosophy of a lot of the VC money, but it's a balancing act. So you really have to balance out what is the, what's in your best interest versus what's in the board.
That's why CEOs get paid the big bucks to make those decisions, right?
Yeah, one of my clients that I've coached for 4.5 years just raised $255 million from Warburg Pincus, and Warburg has no real control over the operational side of Blue Grace Logistics, because Bobby made sure that he structured it in such a way that if they didn't want his terms, they could walk away from the deal. So he has full control of his company, and they'll build a fantastic company, but Warburg doesn't have any steering control of the business.
But to be fair, that's rare. That's rare.
Very, very rare, because he was willing to walk away. He was so willing to walk away that it became not rare anymore.
Yeah.
I think often entrepreneurs are less willing to just say no. Like, I want
keep
this
looking
person.
for the right investor and the right terms. My price, your terms, your price, my terms.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's more of a board issue than a COO issue, really.
Let's shift gears a little bit before we start to wind down. Best practices around communication between the two, the CEO and the COO. Obviously, talk a lot, over communicate, et cetera. But can you be more practical as to what works best?
I talk about it like date night. The CEO and the COO need to have their once or twice a week date night, where they either go for breakfast on Tuesday morning. So Brian and I would run Tuesday and Thursday mornings together at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. when we were training for our half marathons. We would go off site for half a day on Thursdays, and we would just sit at one of our clubs and just do work for 3 hours.
So half day every week.
Yeah, half day every week, just he and I. And we just sit with our laptops doing our work, but because we were with each other, around each other, we could bounce ideas.
Got it.
We also had a weekly 1 hour meeting a one-on-one meeting just to get back in sync, where we talked about what's going on, what's going well, what's not going well, what we're working on, and where we're stuck. Each of us did those updates, and then we went through our housekeepers. We did very limited amount of email and Slack during the week.
Mm-hmm.
We did most of our meetings face-to-face, and we kept our discussions to that weekly meeting.
Got it. And any overlap in terms of where you were both at a lot of meetings, or was it more of a divide and conquer approach?
Yes and no. So we were always at the board meetings together. We were the only two at every board meeting. We were always at the leadership team meetings, always at our finance review meetings, and always at our monthly strategy meetings. So those we were always at together.
Yep.
Any of the functional meetings we would drop in on once in a while. We were often involved in some of our product roadmap meetings for our engineering, because we built our own software internally. But yeah, other than that, no, there wasn't a lot of overlap. We would get involved in a lot of the marketing, creative stuff, because I would be overseeing the marketing teams and the PR teams and the sales teams. And Brian had an eye for detail and simplicity that I think was really powerful. He would notice these tiny little things that no one else could ever see.
Right.
So yes,
again, it played to his strengths, his unique strengths.
And he loved it, right? It was his brand. It's interesting. It's something I'm actually getting more involved with again with the COO Alliance. I've kind of abdicated that, and I really want to dive back in again.
So let's switch gears to that as our last topic. Tell us about the COO Alliance. There's so many groups for CEOs. This is the only one I've ever heard of for COOs, the number 2 in command, second in command.
So what we really noticed, or what I noticed, was there was an infinite number of groups for entrepreneurs. You know, you've got YPO, and you've got the Entrepreneurs Organization, you have Vistage. And
yep.
I was just at a Genius Network event. I go to Baby Bathwater. I go to Mastermind Talks. There's all these, and then there's places for engineers and lawyers and marketers.
Yep.
But there was no true group for the second in command. And the best we ever found was Vistage has a key group, but but that's where you'll have like a marketing manager and a general manager and a finance person and a sales leader. They're not doing the same stuff. And I really wanted a place for the COO to be able to mastermind, share information together, learn how to grow themselves, learn how to make the CEO iconic, learn how to build better communication and trust between the CEO and the COO. So we created this 2 years ago, and we're now we've got the main program runs in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we have 5 events a year, and the COO picks 3 of the 5 to come to. And then we're also launching now in 30 cities, known as the COO City Forums. And we'll be launching in 30 cities over the next 3 years to bring it out deeper into the US and Canadian marketplace.
Much like the YPO kind of model, where you have a local forum of other COOs that you spend time with.
That's right. It's interesting. Like right when I get off this podcast, I'm going to the airport. I'm flying to Lima, Peru to speak to the YPO chapter there. And that'll be the 6th continent that I've worked with YPO in. And
what is the overlap? Just that so many of them are struggling with this question of, do I want a COO?
No, with this event, I'm actually there speaking on operations, execution, growth, and culture. And they often turn to me, like when the publisher of Forbes Magazine called me the CEO Whisperer. It's why these entrepreneurial groups often have me out as a speaker, is to talk to them about the stuff that they don't need to know how to do it. They just need to know it exists, so their COO can know how to do it and make it happen. Got it.
Well, Cameron, I give you so much credit because you've been able to really build an expertise and then shed some light on it for our listeners. How can people learn more about the COO Alliance or get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, we've actually got a podcast as well called the Second in Command Podcast.
I love the name.
Where we don't interview anyone except the COO. So we won't talk to the entrepreneur. I always want the rest of the story.
Yeah.
So that's one place. The other one is the COO Alliance website. It's COOalliance.com. And then on Amazon, all 4 of my books are on Amazon as well. Double Double, Meetings Suck, Vivid Vision, and The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs.
And somehow you find time to sleep in all this?
I balance my life really well. I obsess about free time.
I give you a lot of credit. Well, thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate it, Cameron. Congratulations on a great venture.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me.